Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the president of the Pennsylvania Medical Society joins me shortly. We're going to talk about something that's very important called prior authorization. But first, Gene Barr, he's the president and CEO from the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, joins me. We're going to talk about something that I think is going to stir up a great deal of interest in this state. You know what it's called? It's called Governor Wolf's reelection in 2018.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back to the program. As often is the case, Gene Barr joins me. He was being a world traveler the last time we had the Business Council on. Dave Taylor was on. Gene now as we're having Gene back. I should have added a little preface to that if he gets reelected. I'm not ending the election. The voters get to do that, but you get the point. Big interest on the Republican side. There are 4 announced Republican opponents, I'll put it this way. That'll get resolved in the April primary. So we're going to invite all 4 on the program throughout the course of the winter and spring. What's your general assessment about the race?
I think everybody's in at this point. We were always speculating. It was 3, speculation about whether Speaker Turzai would get in. He is now in.
Speaker Mike Turzai, he's from Allegheny County. Go ahead.
He's been a member of the House since 2001. It was anticipated he would get in. You've got 4 people, very qualified people, really good resumes. You got Senator Scott Wagner, who most people know, member of the Senate, business person, built his own business, Speaker of the House. Right? Yeah. You've got Laura Ellsworth, who's an attorney at Jones Day in Pittsburgh, and you've got Paul Mango as a business person, also from the western part of the state. This is going to be very interesting. You got 3 western PA people, 1 from the center part of the state, 1, of course, Scott Wagner from York, being the same county. From
as
where
the governor,
where
and
governor is.
And I kidded the Auditor General. The Auditor General is, is York owning
York
Pennsylvania?
is like the center of the Pennsylvania political universe these days. So
yeah, that's
you've got that. So it's going to be a very interesting race, and it has been already. You've got some, as you and I were both up in New York and heard each of them talk that day, and it's going to be a very interesting race going into next year.
Right. Yeah, we were Pennsylvania Society at the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association and Comcast hold a seminar, and all 4 Republican candidates were there. Governor Wolf was invited. He couldn't make it. But at any rate, there isn't any doubt that President Donald Trump may not be on the ballot.
Correct.
But you can finish.
It will
my
loom
thought.
over the ballot. There's no question. And I think that when you look at Pennsylvania, there are places that went strongly for him that are probably still strongly for him. I know his popularity ratings are down, but in many cases, he's doing what a lot of the electorate wanted him to do. And part of that is, I would argue, is Western Pennsylvania. Yeah. So we'll see what that does, not only in the governor's race, but you've got the entire House up next year.
That's right.
You've got half of the state Senate up next year. And I think you're going to see a clear distinction between how President Trump plays in the southeast part of the state versus the western part of the state.
Yeah. And at least one of the candidates, as you point out, Senator Scott Wagner, he was the only Senate candidate in the history of the state to win an election on a write-in.
Extremely difficult to do.
He's I mean, how could I put this? A huge supporter of Donald Trump. He's often been called Donald Trump light. There's a whole bunch of
I think he likes to say he was Donald Trump before Donald Trump was Donald Trump. But that's
yeah. So at this point, and we also have the 2 of them, Paul Mango has said he's willing to put $10 million on the table. Scott Wagner's a millionaire. A lot of the radio and TV stations might be very happy because of the commercials.
Well, certainly you're going to see a lot of that. You've got, Speaker Turzai has had the ability to raise money for the House Republican caucus for years. I mean, you've got, again, Laura Ellsworth comes out of a prominent law firm. So I think a lot of people are going to be watching this with interest. I have to point this out,
head of the it was Allegheny Chamber of Commerce, right?
Allegheny Conference. She was the chairman of that, I believe.
Right. So she's been heavily involved with the business community
in the business community in Pittsburgh area. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, as usual, I always put you on the spot. Is there any favorite, or is this thing seems to me that it could go almost any way?
Well, you've got certainly the two biggest names, I would argue, are
Right.
the Speaker of the House
Right.
and Scott Wagner, who was the first one in and has been out very prominent, getting a lot of attention. And we'll see how that goes. I mean, we still have a long way to go until next spring, and it's still a lot of work to be developed. But what the state party does, I don't know how they get involved in this. I think that's still
And they're
to be
going to have to
determined as well.
differentiate themselves on the issues. I mean, often what happens, you have Democrats running, they tend to be more liberal. I mean, obviously, they
Right.
differentiating themselves on the issues. And in our state, you got the economy, you do have health care, you have education always looms large because of its share of the state budget.
Well, and I think the other thing that could inject itself into the race is this. We've all had this discussion over Amazon. Everyone's salivating over the prospects of 50,000 jobs, and Pennsylvania has put in a number of different proposals. One of the things that we're certainly going to talk about as a chamber, look, I'd love Amazon to come. Bringing those jobs,
before Fred,
have their second headquarters.
Before Gene goes on, Fred, we may say something about Fred Anton. Fred and Gene were on for years. Is their Eastern headquarters, their second headquarters? Go ahead.
It may or may not be Eastern, we'll see, but their second headquarters, everybody wants it. And if Pennsylvania gets it, that's phenomenal. If we don't, we need to have a dialogue about why this state was not selected. And that pro or con on Amazon could inject itself into this election next year.
Right. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to get into a couple of items on the business agenda of the Pennsylvania Chamber, and we'll do that when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, Gene Barr joins me as often is the case. As most of our viewers know, he heads the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, and I just referred him as Fred Anton earlier.
We do miss Fred.
Fred Anton.
Look, Fred was an icon in Pennsylvania politics, and it is kind of strange coming on the set, not coming in and sitting next to Fred.
Yeah.
So he deserves all the accolades he's received.
And he's gotten a lot of them. Well deserved. All right, if you had to say, give me the two biggest legislative agenda items for the business community.
Well, for us right now, one of the biggest things that we're pushing on is something, and it gets a little bit down in the weeds on workers' comp, but it's something setting up what are called drug formularies that are used in many, Medicare, CHIP, et cetera. We're trying to bring them into workers' comp as well. And what we have found is, among other things, in a state like, for example, Ohio, as many other states, it has helped reduce the opioid addiction among injured workers. And we all know that a crisis that's raging out here. And it really ties into some of the issues that a Philadelphia Inquirer article did a few years ago about law firms owning pharmacies, et cetera. And we really need to dig into this issue, and it's a very important one, and we're trying to push that through.
So what would you do? I mean, what would the net effect be? That you wouldn't get workers' comp if...
Oh, no, you would get workers' comp, but rather than having a doctor say, well, I want to prescribe 90 days of opioids for you, you'd call that in and say, wait a minute, we don't think, based on the injury you've described, you need 90 days. Maybe it's 7, maybe it's 14, and the doctor then has the ability to appeal that and say, here's why I prescribed that. But we need to start having more oversight, and again, we're not saying doctors are causing this. As is always the case, there's a couple of bad actors out there, as we find everywhere, but it's a matter of putting some controls over that and trying to bring that in, putting workers' comp controls under control.
I mean, I always thought, look, we've all, and I'm sure our viewers have the same situation, we've all gone to a doctor, we've all had pain, and what do doctors want to do? They want to relieve the
yeah,
pain,
and
right?
let's go back a few years ago,
Yeah,
too. Remember
they
what
wanna
happened?
relieve the pain.
You'd go into the doctor and they would prescribe an antibiotic for everything. What happened? We developed these resistant strains because there was an overprescription on those.
Yeah.
We have to address the opioid issue and make sure that we're really prescribing and look at other alternatives to it. And the medical community, actually the doctors are fine with this, the hospitals are supporting this effort. We need to pass it.
And we're going to have the Pennsylvania Medical Society on there. I'm sure that Dr. Christopher may want to comment on that. But the fact of the matter is, here's the good. This is horrible news. Every day you read about somebody dying, and you get these statistics, and 7 a day in our. I mean, or not 7 a day, 7 an hour.
It's incredible what it's doing to our society.
But here's the point: this isn't a Democratic or a Republican issue.
It's a human issue.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It's a crisis in this, and it's a workforce issue for the business community.
Oh, yep. All right, pick another one. One other one.
Well, severance is still out there. We continue to oppose efforts to impose another tax on top of the natural gas industry. Our view is that Pennsylvania has some inherent strengths. One of those is our energy industry. And to continue to find other ways of layering additional taxes on it, in our view, is a tremendous mistake. And we think we need to do what we can to grow this industry and to make Pennsylvania more attractive. One of those ways is through competitive energy costs.
Now look, before I let you go, you've covered the Pennsylvania legislature for years. I have never seen a legislature and a governor, regardless of party, this divided ideologically. And I'm not, the legislature is more conservative. It's probably one of the more conservative in modern history. And we have a liberal governor. I'm not using liberal and conservative in any pejorative way, just descriptive. When Ed Rendell was governor, for 4 years he had Republicans, yet they were able to work out deals. Not all the deals you might smile and say were good.
I'm not thrilled with all of them, that's correct.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, do you see any ray of sunshine that Republicans and Democrats can get their act? Again, you're the expert. You followed this for years.
Well, I don't know about expert, but I've been in politics for 44 years, and I hate to say it, I have never seen at the national or the local or state level us as divided as we have been here. And you can go through all the reasons for it. We have got to find a way of coming back. It's not a case anymore where, okay, I can live with this, you can live with this. It's I'm going to beat you and I'm going to grind you into the ground. And it's not even gotten to the point where I disagree with you. Not only do I disagree with you, you're evil. And we've got to move away from that.
You want to destroy your opponents.
You want to destroy the other side. And we have to move away from that to where we're finding some kind of common ground. I wish I had a great answer for you about how we do it.
No, I agree.
But it has to be done. There has to be some kind of civil discourse. It's one of the reasons why we agreed to implement the Pennsylvania Civility Awards at our dinner last year, to try and highlight the need for this. And Governor Ridge came in to make that presentation.
And he was a great one to do it. And good news about him, Governor Ridge, who had a heart attack.
He did, in Texas.
And he's out now. He's on his way to recovery. That's great news. All right, Gene Barr, as always, thanks for coming. Well, we're going to hear from the president of the Pennsylvania Medical Society, Dr. Theodore Christopher, and we'll get him to weigh in on some very important healthcare subjects, and we'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Well, Dr. Theodore Christopher joins me. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Welcome, doctor, as always. You're back. Good to see you. All right, let's start. You heard the conversation that I had with Gene Barr about opioids, and this has to be a big issue for physicians. And you're a practitioner. What's your view of this?
It's still a major problem. I think it's still a major issue. I think it's the biggest threat to public health in the country in
Wow.
a long time. And it affects not just the health of the country, it's affecting the productivity of the country. So
Yeah,
I
great
think it's a major, major issue. And although we're making some headway, I think it's not nearly enough and not fast enough.
Right. So it has to be the coordination between doctors, hospital. I mean, you go through the whole range, consumer groups, everybody has to get on the same page. But you folks have the primary responsibility to make sure we stay alive, right? That we're healthy. It all falls ultimately on your shoulders, doesn't it? Or am I wrong?
It does. I think. I mean, doctors have the pens that write the prescription. So and so we play a huge role in this. But it's a team effort. This is,
Right.
I think, cooperation of a lot of individuals. It's the hospitals, it's physicians, it's nurses, it's case managers, it's addiction
my.
specialists. This is so far-reaching, Terry, that it's and we haven't done enough yet.
Oh, okay. We'll keep you'll come back on the program.
I will.
We'll keep us posted on this. All right. Prior authorization. Why? First of all, explain it. What does it mean, and why should your patients care? We have a lot of patients out there.
So the insurance companies, in all fairness, are trying to do the right thing. I think the cost of health care has to be addressed. I think many things we do is too expensive. So the insurance companies, in the past, I think came up with this idea of prior authorization. And it used to be, though, for expensive, experimental, I think, treatments or diagnostic procedures that were very expensive. And so you'd have to call the insurance company to have these things approved by them
before you
could prescribe the medication, order the test.
Okay.
Fine, that's not a bad idea. But in the last few years, it's been extended. So now it's more routine things. It's more routine testing. It's more routine medication. And it's routine procedures. And it's not transparent. It's not quick, I think, by any means.
So
and it
can I
delays patient
stop
care.
you here about the quick? And sometimes that can be a huge issue medically, can it? If you have to
Absolutely.
you know right where I'm heading with this question.
Well, yeah. So if you have, for example, back pain and you need an MRI, and your physician says, okay, you're in too much pain, you need an MRI, let's see what's going on there. And so you have to have that approved by some insurance companies. And it can take days and days and days. And if your back pain is something that's an emergency, then you might miss something that's not just routine back pain. So that's just one example.
Yeah. So is there, I mean, what's the solution to it? I mean, is this something that physicians have to work out with the insurance companies? And a lot of people won't like what I'm going to say. Is this something that involves lawmakers? You know, once you get, it gets a lot more complicated once you do that.
Well, right. So you can get a lot more done by, or they say legislation, but we would like to kind of drive this process, I think. So there's there's a bill out there that would make the process more transparent to physicians and patients. And it would list the criteria that the insurance companies have for us to have prior authorization, so you know exactly what the playing field is, which test they're talking about, and it would be faster. And so it would take...
I was going to say the speed, I'm still hung up on this because I fortunately, personally, have not had a lot of problems with it, but I know people who've come and, you're having a conversation with somebody and they'll say it took 3 weeks to get this and I need to get in, I'm in pain and I can't get, and you hear that all the time, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. And so I'll tell you like a dirty little secret what happens sometimes. And as you know, I'm an emergency physician.
Right.
And so I think, and I'll just say it because it happens. Some doctors, rather than get the prior authorization, they'll tell the patient to go to the emergency room. Yeah. And then if they go to the emergency room, you don't need prior authorization. It is done as
that's a great. But if it's going on, we need to know about it. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about the role, or the doctor is the role of nurse practitioners, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives.
Welcome back. Well, there's been a lot of news and in some respects some controversy about the role that nurse practitioners would play. I noticed that you wrote a column in Penn Live. I'll hold it up here. I don't know if you can get it, but at any rate, it was in Penn Live, and you talk about a more complete picture on nurse practitioners. So, first of all, what's the essence of the issue? Why should our folks out there care about the role of nurse practitioners?
Well, first of all, nurse practitioners and the physician assistants both are very vital cogs to the wheel of healthcare. So I work in the ER at Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia. We've employed nurse practitioners and PAs for years and years and years. They're a vital part of our team.
Absolutely.
And that's in the city. In the suburbs, the same thing. In the rural areas, the same thing. So they have a vital role in the healthcare of our citizens. The issue is that and I'm not sure it's really every nurse practitioner, but at least their leadership would like them to have independent practice without the supervision and the oversight.
I mean, being able to make an independent judgment about what to do with a patient, and it wouldn't be the doctor involved in that decision. Do I got that right? Yes,
and so most of the time they do make independent decisions, and they practice and they prescribe and they order tests, and that's fine. But medicine can be complicated, and so not having the ability or the wherewithal or the access to a physician in time of need is the issue. And so if they got independent practice and they didn't have that oversight, that's what would happen.
Is it the heart? Is the real problem here the doctor shortage in many specialties, in many, I mean, we hear all the time about, particularly in rural PA, and you mentioned rural Pennsylvania, but rural parts of America is the real problem that we have a doctor shortage, and we have a doctor shortage in some important specialties as well. Am I?
Yeah, I think so. I think rural medicine, I think, is an issue, I think, regardless. If you look at states where the nurse practitioners have gained independent practice, access to care has not been improved in those states. And so just like the physicians, there's an issue with getting the nurse practitioners out to the rural areas, I think, where there's a need.
Right.
Because quite frankly, independent practice is difficult today. And it's hard for the doctors, it's hard for the nurse practitioners.
Well, aren't many physicians now becoming part of a system, usually a hospital system, as opposed to practicing on their own?
Well, that's true, and so our nurse
I'm not being critical of it. I'm just saying that they have more resources at their disposal by doing that, and in some cases can better help the patient.
It's a great point. I mean, in my specialty, emergency medicine, I mean, they love having us there. So we practice side by side, and 90% of the time they're fine. They prescribe, they see patients, they order tests, but that 10% or those 1 or 2 or 3 patients every shift who look like it's not a serious issue, but there's some nuance or some complication in the medical the medical care. That's where they need us.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in. You've made some great points. I think our viewers will certainly appreciate that. All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.